sitting in my son's worn, gray bedtime story chair, where he tucks himself in the crook of my arm, and where we've read Good Night, Construction Site at least 1,000 times. I glance up at the photo that we have hanging over his crib. It's a photo of my mother-in-law holding my son. All you can see are her slender arms wrapped in a tan sweater, cradling his soft newborn body in a taupe-ribbed onesie. It is a photo of soft, bland neutrals, but one that is as colorful and as meaningful as the whole world to me. It is a very precious photo for us because it's one that we have, only one of a few that we actually have, as their lives only cross paths for 4 short months. It is a photo that is both bitter and sweet, joy through sorrow, and then back there again. And it reminds me of my work as a pediatric oncology nurse, in which paradox is sometimes alive and well. I was caring for a patient who was 7 years old a few years ago on my unit in pediatric oncology. Unfortunately, that week, James's family had been told that their treatment options were exhausted. Understandably, it had been a very difficult week for his family, and one that we dread in pediatric oncology, but it sometimes is the case. And so, with that, James's family was really in that liminal space, the one between treatment and death. But like many pediatric oncology patients, James looked very different than what his lab panel represented. Even though James's lab panel did not look so good, what we saw in real life was an exuberant, excited 7-year-old boy. That afternoon, James's mom asked if I could keep my eye out on him while she ran a few errands, maybe seeking some normalcy amidst her chaos. And so, of course, I agreed to doing that. And I didn't understand at the time the weight of the request she had asked me to do, and just how much of a gift she had given me to spend some time with her son who just had a few months left to live. So after checking on my other patient, I went into James's room and I said, "Hey James, how's it going?" And James has kind of like an infamously high-pitched, nasally voice, and I'm not going to do it justice tonight, so I'm not even going to try. But he was bored with a capital B. And so I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, my apologies. He said, "I want to watch YouTube." And I said, "Well, what about playing a board game?" And he said, "Nah." I said, "What about doing some coloring?" "Nah." And then in a moment of creativity that only children can offer you sometimes, I said, "What about building a road and we can drive trucks on it and we can make a construction site?" And he looked up away from the screen of the TV and he looked over at me and his eyes sparkled. And he said, "Yeah, that sounds awesome." And so we spent the next hour cutting out construction paper and building bridges out of cardboard, cut up emesis basins, and using tongue depressors to make stop signs. And we drove the roads on the hospital tray table, back and forth. And it was in that moment that James asked me one of the most profound, unanswerable questions of my career. And he drove his truck over to the edge of the tray table, and he looked up at me, and he said, "How come the road has to end here?" This moment continues to haunt me, not in the creepy sense of haunting, but in the lingering sense, in the sense that it continues to stick with me. I can't get rid of it. And it's a moment that has continued to shape my nursing practice. And so, as my son looks up at me again and says, "Can we read that book one more time?" his eyes gleaming, I read Good Night, Construction Site one more time, and I let him linger in my arms, and we just sit and look up at the photo that is over his crib. And I allow myself to settle into the paradox, just like I settle into that gray worn chair, feeling joy for the roads that are continuing forward and some sorrow for those that have ended.